My name is Mary, and I am 74 years old. If you had met me 10 years ago, you would have seen a vibrant woman, always present at family gatherings, chatting cheerfully with neighbors, and taking morning walks through the park with a few close friends. I used to think that old age was a reward, a time to slow down and enjoy the things I had worked my whole life for. But then, everything changed slowly, quietly, like a shadow creeping into my life without me even realizing it. My close friends began moving away, and a few sadly passed on. My children grew up, became busy, and the phone calls became less frequent. I stayed in my old house, but it no longer felt as warm as it once did. At first, I thought this was just a normal part of life's changes. But the more time passed, the more I felt lost. Every morning I woke up in silence, with no one to talk to, no visitors, and I began to ask myself, am I becoming invisible? Loneliness doesn't hit you like a storm. It's more like a fine, cold, persistent drizzle. And what troubled me the most was that much of this distance was caused by me. I didn't realize I had changed. I became more irritable, talking a lot but listening less. I became annoyed by little things, holding on to outdated thoughts, and rejecting anything new. I used my age as an excuse to neglect my appearance, decline invitations, and gradually, I pushed people away without even realizing it. One evening, after ending a short phone call with my granddaughter, just a few polite words before she said, "I'm busy, I'll call you back later." "Grandma," I sat quietly on the couch, still holding the phone, and a harsh truth hit me. I've contributed to this loneliness. Not everyone is brave enough to face that. We often think loneliness is due to circumstances, others being insensitive, or our children being busy. But if we are honest, we will see that there are habits, reactions, and old beliefs that we refuse to change, gradually pushing us away from the people we love. And as I began to change little by little, learning to listen, taking care of myself, being more open, I felt life soften again. Small, but warm connections. A message from an old friend. An afternoon spent with my granddaughter. A handshake at a senior tech class. Things that seemed small, but were enough to remind me I was never truly left behind. I just needed to open the door first. Today, I want to share with you the habits that quietly make many older adults lonely, just like I was. Not to blame, but to reflect. Each habit will be a slice of my life, painful, regretful, but also hopeful. And I believe, if you are somewhere on the same journey as I was, you can still change, still live an old age that is lovely, worth living, and full of connection. One of the first habits we often notice is negativity and criticism. There was a time when I didn't realize that I was starting my day with complaints. I used to be a person who laughed a lot, but gradually, the first words I said every morning were things like, "The weather's so gloomy today, my back hurts again," or "Why doesn't that girl next door ever say hello to anyone?" I began complaining more whenever my grandchildren came over. I'd talk about the unhelpful doctor, rising prices, and the news being full of bad stories. At first, I thought I was just sharing my thoughts. But then I noticed, the kids didn't come by as often. The phone calls became shorter. Sometimes just "How are you, Grandma?" before rushing to end the conversation. I used to blame them for being insensitive. But one day, my granddaughter little Ellie quietly said during a family meal, "Grandma, you always complain. It makes me sad." I froze. That sentence was like a mirror reflecting right into me. I suddenly realized I was a woman carrying too many disappointments, too many negative words. No one wants to be around a source of constant negativity, even if they love you. I started trying to change. Slowly, but sincerely. Instead of complaining about my aching back, I'd say, "I'm lucky I can still walk to the garden every morning." Instead of criticizing the neighbor girl's strange outfit, I'd ask her name, then compliment her cat-shaped backpack, and for the first time in months, she smiled and greeted me. I learned to start conversations with something positive. A delicious meal, a lovely memory, something I'm grateful for today. I noticed the people around me started to smile more when talking to me. My grandchildren's gaze wasn't full of pity anymore, but warmth. What I learned is, criticism and negativity don't make people feel like they understand us more, they just wear them out. But gratitude, curiosity, and a positive outlook are bridges to connect, to love. Loneliness doesn't just come from the absence of others, it also comes from how we push others away. And when we change our tone, our energy, everything begins to change. No one gets older without carrying some pain, some discomfort. But in the midst of that, we still have the choice to choose the light. We can still be the person who makes others feel comfortable and drawn to us. And that is a miracle, that as we age, we can still be a source of joy for ourselves and those around us. Along with negativity, one of the signs of neglecting self-care is when we start ignoring our personal hygiene and appearance. There was a time when I stopped bothering to look in the mirror each morning. My hair was messy, my clothes were old and wrinkled, I just grabbed whatever was easiest. I made excuses. At this age, it doesn't matter what I wear. I stopped using the light perfume I once loved, didn't wear lipstick, and no longer tied on the silk scarf I used to adore. I thought, taking care of my appearance was a luxury now, maybe even pointless. Then one day, while having lunch with my old friend Martha, I noticed she was wearing a soft green sweater, her hair neatly styled, and her lips touched with a hint of pink. Martha had always been simple, but at that moment, she radiated an unexpected freshness. I blurted out, "You're still so stylish." She smiled kindly, not for anyone to admire, but to remind myself that I'm still living. That sentence stayed with me all afternoon. I realized that I had gradually let go of my own image. Every time I wore sloppy clothes, or didn't comb my hair, I was silently telling the world, and myself, that I no longer mattered. And honestly, when I saw myself like that in the mirror, I didn't even want to leave the house. But when I began doing small things, trimming my nails, applying some lotion, picking a bright-colored shirt, I began to feel a little bit of confidence return. I walked through the park without lowering my head. I spoke to my neighbors with a smile instead of avoiding their gaze. No one expects us to look like we're 30 again, but taking care of ourselves, even just washing our face more thoroughly, combing our hair every morning, or choosing a neat outfit, is our way of saying, I still value myself, and that self-respect radiates, others will feel it too. I remember one time, my granddaughter came up, hugged me, and said, "You smell so nice today. I love it when you're like this." I smiled, feeling warm inside, not because of the perfume, but because I had become the kind of grandmother she wanted to hug tightly. Maybe we can't move as fast as before, but self-care is never outdated. It's the small flame that keeps our hearts from growing cold. It's the whisper every day, I'm still here, I'm still living, and I deserve to be treated kindly, even by myself. The next habit we easily fall into as we age is rigidity and resistance to change. I used to be very allergic to the word new. A smartphone? No thank you. Shopping online? I didn't even know which button to press. My son wanted to buy me a tablet to make video calls, and I refused right away. I don't need that. A regular phone call is good enough for me. I thought I was preserving my traditional lifestyle, holding on to the last bits of me in a world that was changing too fast. But in reality, I was building a wall that separated me from everyone. When the family gathered on Zoom during the pandemic, I was the only one absent because I didn't know how to use it. When my grandchild sent a birthday photo through a message, I couldn't even open it. I started to feel left out, left behind, and I realized that I had locked myself in the past. One day, my 15-year-old grandson came over and saw me struggling with my old phone. He said, "Grandma, let me show you how to make a video call. It's really simple." I hesitated, but eventually let him teach me. Just a few minutes later, I was able to call my daughter and saw her face on the screen. The wrinkles around her eyes that I missed so much. I cried right there on the call. Not because of the technology, but because I realized, sometimes, opening up to something new isn't about changing who you are, but about preserving those old connections. From that day, I started trying things I had once said I'd never do. Learning how to send emails, looking for cooking videos online, listening to old music on YouTube. It sounds funny, but one time I even tried meditating using an app. Every time I learned something new, not only did I expand my world, I also felt a little younger. I didn't have to become modern. I just needed to be flexible enough not to turn myself into a lonely island. Change is truly scary, but even scarier is clinging to the old until no one can understand you anymore. I didn't want to be the grandmother who always scolded the grandkids for staring at their phones. I wanted to be the one who says, "Send me that link, I want to check it out." We don't need to master the new world, but we can step into it with open eyes, an open heart, and the curiosity of a child. Because in the end, when we open ourselves to change, we don't just engage with the world, we also keep our loved ones close. As time goes by, it's easy for us to accumulate things and hold on to items we no longer need. My house, after more than 40 years of living here, has been filled with things I couldn't bear to part with. An old shirt of my husband's, he passed away more than 10 years ago. A pen box with no ink, a pile of tablecloths that have never been used, even old newspapers from the time when I was still working. I kept it all. At first I told everyone, these things are memories, they are my past. But one day, my granddaughter came over, and she accidentally kicked a box of old things. Inside were scratched up CDs. She asked, "Grandma, do you still listen to these?" I was silent. No, I hadn't listened to them in years, but I kept them, not because I needed them, but because I was afraid that throwing them away would mean accepting that a part of my life had passed. I realized that the things I kept weren't just objects. They were emotions, memories, a way of clinging to the old to fill the emptiness of the present. But the more I accumulated, the more suffocated I felt. My little house, once cozy, now seemed crowded. Even the path to the balcony where I used to sit and drink tea was blocked by boxers. Then one day, I decided to start cleaning up. Not to throw everything away, but to select carefully. I kept one shirt of my husband's, the one he always wore on weekends, still faintly smelling of mint. The rest, I folded neatly and put into charity bags. Every time I took a bag out of the house, I felt my heart lighten a little. I hadn't forgotten my husband, I hadn't let go of the past, but I was learning to prevent the past from weighing down the present. Something surprising happened. As the house became less cluttered, my mind became less cluttered too. I slept better. I invited friends over more often. I could move around my home more easily. The living space became more open and brighter, and so did I. Holding on to everything doesn't make us remember more. It just makes us live less in the present. We don't need physical proof to love or remember. Sometimes, the most beautiful memories come when we know when to let go, to let the past rest, and live fully in the present. I've learned that every item we let go of at the right time is a welcome to something new, waiting ahead. Impatience is also a common sign that comes with aging. There are days when I find myself irritated for no reason. Just a phone ringing too long, a slow waiter, or a little grandchild asking the same question over and over. Those little things are enough to make me frown, sigh, or even snap. I blamed it on old age. Older people get tired and cranky, I thought. But deep down, I knew it wasn't just age. It was impatience with others, with life, and with myself. I remember one time when my grandson came to invite me to play a puzzle. He was slow, very slow. Every time he placed a piece wrong, I wanted to snatch it away and finish it quickly. After the third time, he stopped and quietly said, "Grandma, you don't like playing with me, do you?" My heart sank. Not because he was upset, but because he was right. In my rush to make everything my way, I missed the most important thing, the time spent with him, listening to his laughter and seeing the curiosity in his eyes. I started asking myself, why was I so impatient? Was it because I felt like I didn't have much time left, so everything had to be quick and efficient? Or was it because I felt like I was losing control, and the only thing left to keep some authority was sharp words? I'm not sure, but I know this. Every time I lost my patience, something inside me also faded away: connection, warmth, and sometimes even the small joys of a quiet afternoon. So, I started over. Whenever I feel my irritation rising, I stop. Really stop. I take a deep breath, count to 3, and look at the person in front of me, not with a critical eye, but with one of empathy. I changed how I respond. Instead of criticizing, I ask, "Do you need my help?" Instead of sighing, I smile. Not because everything is easy, but because I choose to soothe my heart. The miracle is when I calm down, others do too. Conversations become warmer. The moments together become more precious. And I realize, patience is not about endurance, but a gift given to others and to myself. Old age doesn't have to be a time of rushing, snapping, or controlling. It can be a time of slowness, understanding, and deep love if we are willing to stop, breathe, and live gently. Another dangerous habit that can sneak up on us as we age is talking too much without listening. I used to think that talking was the way to connect with enough words. I would be heard, cared for. So whenever someone visited, I would go on and on, recounting stories from the past, sharing my sorrows, even discussing the news I had just seen on TV. At first, people would smile and nod. But gradually, I began to notice their eyes wandering elsewhere. They'd glance at their watches. Their smiles became more forced, shorter, and soon they found excuses to leave early. I was confused. Why didn't they want to stay as long as before? One day, my only true friend, Clara, came by. We sat together for tea, just like we always did. I began talking about my joint pain, then moved on to the rising costs of everything, followed by the noisy neighbors renovating their house. Clara didn't say a word. She just sat quietly, and then suddenly sighed and gently said, piercing my heart, "Mary, have you ever wondered how the other person feels? I came here to hear how you're doing, not just to listen to you talk." I was stunned. I had gotten so used to filling every silence with my own words that I no longer made space for others to speak. I wasn't really listening, truly listening, for a long time. I thought I was sharing, but in reality, I was just giving a monologue. I had forgotten that a conversation needs to be two. That day, after Clara left, I sat alone on the couch. In my mind, a question echoed: when someone leaves me, do they feel heard, or do they feel ignored? From then on, I decided to practice silence. The next time my granddaughter visited, instead of talking about my aching back, I asked, "How has your week been at school?" And I listened quietly. I didn't interrupt, correct her, or offer advice. I just listened. What I received was a surprise. She shared more than I expected: her worries about school, what her friends had said, feelings she had never spoken of before. I found myself being a grandmother again, not a loudspeaker, but a safe haven for her soul. I also realized that when I listen, others feel important. They feel seen, understood, and because of that, they open up, sharing and connecting with me in a real way, not just out of politeness. Listening is a skill, but it's also a gift, one that we, as older people, sometimes forget we can still offer. A simple nod, a caring look, a brief question followed by quiet. That's enough to say, "I'm here, I'm listening to you." And when we learn to listen, we also hear our own hearts, something I had forgotten amidst all the long stories over the years. As we grow older, our pride can push others away, instead of allowing us to accept their help. I've never liked to bother anyone. Since I was young, I got used to doing everything on my own, raising children, maintaining the house, enduring loneliness after my husband passed. Over time, I came to believe that being independent was a sign of strength. Asking for help was a weakness. So, when I entered my later years, I still held on to this mindset. Even though my knees ached every time I climbed the stairs, I still refused the walker my son brought. Even though my hands shook when I poured tea, I waved off the neighbor's offer to help carry my bags up the steps. I would smile and say, "It's fine," and quietly struggle on my own, clumsy and exhausted. The truth is, deep inside, I longed for someone to be there with me. But I was afraid that others would see me as weak, afraid of becoming a burden, afraid that one day I wouldn't be the strong mother or the capable grandmother anymore. Until one day, I slipped and fell in the bathroom. It wasn't serious, but I couldn't get up by myself. I lay there, cold and wet, the phone just a few steps away on the bed, but I couldn't reach it. I didn't call anyone. I just lay still, staring up at the ceiling, my heart pounding with fear. Not because of the pain, but because of the loneliness. It wasn't until almost an hour later that my neighbor, Mr. Bill, came over, noticing the bathroom light had been on too long. He called 911 and stayed with me until the ambulance arrived. When I looked at him, the tears just started to flow. At that moment, I realized, none of us are truly strong enough to never need anyone. We don't live to prove that we can be alone until the very end of our lives. We live to be loved, and sometimes, love begins with a simple question: "Can you help me?" After that day, I began to soften. When I couldn't sleep, I'd call my daughter just to hear her voice. When I went to the store, I let the young neighbor push my cart. When I didn't know how to use my new phone, I asked my grandson for help. The miracle is, no one saw me as weak. On the contrary, they saw me as more approachable. They saw me as one of them, a human with limits, needs, and the trust to open my heart. And slowly, my house was no longer as quiet as before. The laughter, the conversations, the outstretched hands, they returned. No one wants to live in solitude. But sometimes, it's our pride and arrogance that build walls, and then we sit inside, hoping someone will climb over. Now, I'm learning to open that door first. Excessive frugality and not enjoying life is another habit that can easily take root as we age. I used to be very good at managing money, not because I earned a lot, but because I knew how to make do. When I was younger, every penny had to be stretched just right to ensure enough rice, enough milk for the kids. I learned to save from my mother, a woman who lived through 2 wars and a time of scarcity. Every coin I spent was carefully considered, and that habit stayed with me throughout my life. When I retired, my savings were enough to live comfortably. I wasn't rich, but I wasn't struggling either. Yet, I still couldn't bring myself to spend. I wore clothes with worn-out sleeves. I ate simple meals that were almost tasteless. I turned down trips that my friends invited me on, simply because they were too expensive. I got my hair cut at a budget salon, used an old phone, and always refused gifts for myself. One day, my granddaughter Emily invited me to a piano concert at the theater. She knew I loved classical music, but when I saw the ticket price, I immediately declined. "I can listen at home. I don't need to spend money like that," I said. Emily didn't respond. But that night, as I sat alone in the living room, Beethoven's music filled the air from my old speaker, and I suddenly felt empty. I realized I had sacrificed too much joy just to save for later. I had once thought, living frugally is being wise, but gradually, I came to understand that excessive saving is also a form of fear of running out, fear of the uncertain future. And while worrying about days yet to come, I had missed the joys right in front of me. Money isn't something we can take with us when we leave this world. It's a tool to connect, to experience, to enjoy the things that make life worth living. After that, I made small changes. Not by splurging, but by allowing myself to live more fully. I bought myself a blue scarf, a color I had always loved. I went to the concert with Emily that I had originally turned down. As the music played, I cried not just because of the melody, but because for the first time in a long while, I truly felt alive. I started spending money on coffee dates with old friends. I booked a short trip to a place my husband and I had always dreamed of visiting. I bought a watercolor painting set and began painting again, just like I did as a young woman. And do you know what happened? It wasn't that I lost money. It was that I reclaimed the pieces of happiness I had long forgotten. Living frugally is good, but living without allowing yourself to enjoy life, it's just existing, not truly living. And I, at the age of 74, have finally learned how to truly live. Like many older people, Mary used to criticize the lifestyle of the younger generation, making her feel disconnected and unable to understand them. This created an unnecessary gap in relationships across generations. See, I remember shaking my head every time I saw the kids glued to their phones. They know nothing about the real world, I used to say. They're living in that tiny screen all the time. I also complained about the music they listened to. It was loud, chaotic, and lacked depth. I talked about the way they dressed, how they communicated, even the way they loved. I thought I knew better. I thought I understood the world better than they did. But then, one day, I found my grandson, Alex, sitting in his room, crying. He's 19, a smart college student, emotional and thoughtful. I gently walked in and asked him what was wrong. He said he felt misunderstood, judged not only by society but by his own family. "Grandma, you think we just play on our phones, but phones are where I read books, learn languages, and connect with friends who are far away. It's a tool, not a crime." I went silent. For the first time, I saw the world through his eyes, and I realized that, as an older person, I was standing on the other side of the bridge, instead of walking over to listen. I began to make an effort to change. I sat with Alex and said, "Show me that TikTok you were laughing at earlier." He looked surprised but excited, and I laughed too. Not because the video was particularly funny, but because I saw the look in Alex's eyes, a spark of connection when he felt truly seen and shared. I asked him to make a playlist of the songs he liked. I listened. Some songs I didn't understand at all, but others made me feel the sincerity, the emotion, and even the pain of a generation growing up in a world that changes every day. I asked my granddaughter about the things she was learning about technology, psychology, things I'd never encountered when I was her age. I learned a lot from them, not just about information, but about resilience, flexibility, and the beautiful dreams of a generation that sees the world differently. I realized that just because today's world is different from the one I lived in, doesn't mean it's any less valuable. We, the older generation, have wisdom and experience, but they, the younger generation, have energy, hope, and fresh perspectives. If only one side speaks, then both generations lose. I began to feel closer to my grandchildren, not because I understood them completely, but because I started to want to understand. And the miracle happened when I lowered my ego. The distance between us began to shrink. Now, whenever I see the kids with their earbuds in and fingers scrolling on screens, I don't shake my head anymore. I smile, because I know that somewhere in their world, there are wonderful things, growing things that, if I choose to listen and observe, I can also be a part of. Another habit that prevents us from truly living is holding on to grudges and regrets. For a long time, I carried a deep anger inside me, an anger that I couldn't release, that stayed quietly in my heart, like a small stone, but gradually grew heavier and heavier. I thought I had forgiven those who hurt me, but in reality, I hadn't. They were no longer in my life, yet I kept thinking about what had happened. I thought about the emotional gaps in my family, the times I felt forgotten, and the mistakes I couldn't let go of. One day, I ran into my sister, the one I hadn't spoken to for many years due to an old misunderstanding. I hadn't thought about it in a long time, but when I saw her, that old anger came rushing back. She never admits her mistakes, I thought, but I didn't say anything. She looked at me and smiled, but that smile made me feel distant. She wasn't the person I used to know. Time had changed everything. But then, one day, as I sat alone thinking about the past, I suddenly understood something important. I couldn't keep living in anger and regret. The anger and sadness didn't make me stronger. They only made me more tired. They made me forget the important things in life, my family, my friends, the happy moments that had passed. I remembered a saying from an old friend: "We can't change what's happened, but we can change how we look at it." And that was true. I began to view my past through a different lens. I couldn't change the mistakes, couldn't change how others treated me, but I could choose not to carry that anger into today. I began writing letters to people I had lost touch with, simple letters, expecting nothing. I would write, "I've been thinking about you, and I hope you're doing well. Even if we never meet again, I'll always cherish the memories we shared." It wasn't to apologize or assign blame, it was simply to free myself from old burdens. One day, my sister called. Her voice sounded tired, but when she heard mine, she smiled, and we talked as if there had never been any distance between us. The apologies didn't need to be spoken, they had already been felt. It was then that I understood. Sometimes, forgiveness isn't for others, but for ourselves. When I forgave the past, I was finally able to embrace the present and enjoy what I had. We all have the choice to live with our pain and regret, or to forgive and move forward. I can't go back to the past, but I can live fully in the present. And so, I decided to let go. Finally, the habit of neglecting our health is one of the biggest causes of harm to our lives as we age. People often say that when you get older, health becomes a crucial part of life. But when I was younger, I never thought about that. I felt like I would always be healthy, able to run fast, travel far, and do anything I wanted without worrying about my health. But gradually, over the years, I started feeling the changes. Knee pain when climbing stairs, a constant backache every time I woke up in the morning. These weren't just signs of aging, but signals that my body was trying to send me. I still remember the first time I skipped a routine health checkup. At that time, I felt fine, nothing to worry about. It's just some normal aches, I thought. But as the pain started to last longer, I still didn't go to the doctor. The reason was simply didn't want to face the truth. I didn't want to accept that I was getting older, that I wasn't as healthy as before. I kept telling myself, it's okay, it'll pass. But gradually, I began to feel more tired, irritable, and my mood was unstable. The days I didn't go out to exercise, didn't meet with friends, and kept living in imaginary worries, I started to become more isolated, not just from others, but also from myself. One day, I met a doctor. He was knowledgeable and patient. After checking my health, he gently said to me, "Mary, if you don't take care of your health, you won't be able to do the things you want to do in the years ahead. We can take care of ourselves, even when we don't feel anything's wrong." His words shook me. I realized that neglecting my health wasn't just a mistake. It was a way of denying myself, denying my right to live healthily and happily in my later years. The very next day, I began changing my habits. I started walking every day, even if it was just a few laps around the block. I began eating healthier, drinking enough water, and going to bed on time. I also started scheduling regular health checkups, even though I was a little nervous. But I understood that it was the only way to protect my body. Interestingly, when I started taking care of my health, I felt alive again. I had more energy, my mood improved, and most importantly, I felt reconnected with myself. Little things like waking up with a sense of vitality in the morning, or the joy of stepping outside to enjoy the sunshine, became an important part of my life. You may think these changes are too late, but I believe it's never too late to start taking care of yourself, especially when you can enjoy a healthy and meaningful life in the years ahead. I didn't just take care of my body, I also learned to love it more, to appreciate what I had. And I realized that when I take care of my health, I am also nurturing my relationships, experiences, and all the wonderful things life has to offer. Old age isn't something to fear if we know how to live fully. The habits we form over the years can deeply affect our health and happiness. However, we can absolutely change them. Mary, through her story, learned that even small changes in habits can lead to a better life. She started taking care of herself, rebuilding relationships, and most importantly, forgiving. These changes not only helped Mary live healthier, but they also helped her reconnect with those around her. We all can fall into bad habits as we age, but the important thing is to recognize and change them. Living a fulfilling life isn't just a dream, it's something we can absolutely make happen. Take the time to take care of yourself, connect with others, and learn to forgive. We can't change the past, but we can change how we live in the present. In the end, life is a long journey. If we know how to love ourselves and open our hearts to others, each day becomes a precious gift. I hope these habits will help you live happier, healthier, and more connected in your later years. Thank you for following.